It's time for the Douglas Coleman Show. Mr. Smooth and Savvy is joined by guests from all walks of life, from the entertainment industry to authors to political and social commentators, the famous and not so famous, the controversial and the light and fluffy. We have it all. Now, here's Douglas Coleman.
Okay, please welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show, Richard Sparks. Hi, Richard. How are you?
Hi, Douglas. I'm very well. How's yourself?
Doing well, thank you. Thank you for coming on the show. It's nice to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
As we were just talking about, do you live in Las Vegas or do you just have businesses there?
I live in Los Angeles, although I still go back and forth to London a couple of times a year. I've lived here for 30 years now.
All right.
I was hired by Columbia Pictures Television, and we moved into my wife's parents' garage, which was actually being converted for their parents before they passed. So we had somewhere to stay, and one thing led to another, and we stayed ever since, although we kept a pied-à-terre in London, so we like to go back there. I love it out here, and I also love Las Vegas.
Well, I was going to say you were formerly British, but that's not quite accurate, is it? You're always British.
I changed my nationality and kept the accent. I thought I'd have the best of both worlds.
Oh, all right. So
to some extent. Well, yes, I'm always going to be British, but I'm an American citizen now, and I love it here. I'm nowhere's perfect, of course, but it suits us fine. Our daughter went to school here and actually went back to college in London, and now lives here as well. So, yeah, we're pretty Californian now, although my wife was born in New York and raised there. But she moved to London to go to art school, which is how we eventually met.
Well,
40 years we've been. If we last until December, it'll be 40 years.
Wow, that's amazing.
Of marriage, yeah.
So I know this is a big question, but if you had to say one particular thing that you like about America over Britain, what would it be?
When I first came here, I was 18. Before going to university, I got a job in the Canadian Arctic, actually on the North Pole as it then was, but that shifts all the time. The magnetic North Pole in those days was under Prince Patrick Island. It's a long way north. I hitchhiked across Canada. This is all before going up to university, because I'd passed the university entrance, got accepted in November, December, and the year starts in September, October. So you have this, what we call a gap year now, so 9 months. So I hitchhiked across Canada in March, which was pretty good fun, and then a plane from Calgary to Yellowknife, and then on to Resolute Bay, and then on to Prince Patrick Island, where there's an airstrip just on the ice and a bunch of huts, and 63 days up there working on an oil exploration crew, which was phenomenally, really exciting for an 18-year-old kid straight out of English boarding school. And just loved it. And then we earned enough money up there a friend of mine came along with me as well. He had a slightly different job in the camp, so we weren't working together. Then we hitchhiked down we got a bus. We got lots of money for working up there, as you can imagine, and nowhere to spend it. Got a bus down to Great Falls, Montana, where we bought a 1955 Ford station wagon and drove all the way down into Mexico and then across to California. And the moment I got to LA, I just thought, this is amazing. I just absolutely loved it. Also much of the rest, America west of the Rockies. I think it's great. One of the things that really appealed to me then was that America seemed to be the future, and Britain was the past in a way. I can't really explain that because it doesn't make sense. But I always thought that there were more possibilities here, that the world was more of our oyster, and you are not held back by not being part of the establishment or part of the club or this, that, the other, which I'm sure is completely not true, but it just felt that there were more things happening here. And so I kept coming back, especially when I started becoming a scriptwriter, because you got to keep turning up and taking meetings and trying to get through the doors. And I was very lucky that my wife's parents had a place here, so we could move in with our baby child and have somewhere to put down roots here as well. So yeah, it's always been, America's very exciting. I think less so now, possibly because I'm older and possibly because America's changed to some extent. It seems, to have more less certainty about itself, so that the American dream is available to everyone, so to speak. People are saying, well, the next generations are going to be poorer than their parents, which is the first time that's happened in America. So, and I think things are shifting, but to me, it's still, I still love it.
Well, I think you're right about Britain being sort of the old school and America being the new frontier. America's always been founded on this idea of you are what you do, rather than who you were born to and what class you were born into. And I think,
and the class system in England is it's not really as strong as it was, but it's still perceived to hold people back or to push people on. And you have it here with what they call them now, Nepo babies in Hollywood or other industries. There's an upper class here and a privileged class, but it does definitely seem more like that in England, which is also changing. It's much more of a meritocracy, and that's a good thing.
Well, I'm a big fan of British history, and what I've noticed was that after World War I, it really started to change, and then after World War II was sort of the nail in the coffin, because the boys were fighting together. The upper class and the lower classes were all dying equally, and once people sort of realized that,
there was a massive slaughter in the First World War, and that was the end of the Edwardian era.
Yeah,
and then of course America with the Roaring 20s and 30s and the Depression. There's quite a change in that 20 years between the end of World War I and World War II, or 23 years in the case of America, because they started late. But thank goodness they came in. Churchill was desperate, and so was Roosevelt, desperate to get America involved in the fight against fascism. And eventually, do you know how America got into the Second World War?
Well, I think primarily the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, and that sort of changed the sentiment of the country around. And then actually Hitler had declared war on us.
Hitler declared war on America.
Yeah.
And then that's when Churchill said, wow, finally. I mean, it was one of the very stupidest things he did, because his munitions experts had come over to America and looked at the factories that were going to convert to make tanks and guns and bombs, and they just knew they were completely outmatched. The American production was much more advanced and as much more of it than the whole of Europe put together, let alone just Germany. So, there was a great resistance among a lot of American politicians. The isolationist wing didn't want to get involved. It's happening again now.
Oh, well, it wasn't just the government. It was 90% of the American population didn't want to get involved in another European war, because most of the people...
nobody wants to get involved in wars. They're horrible things.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's the alternative is worse, sad to say.
Well, it took
it's
all
of... It's also interesting, this ties in with my book, is that in gaming online, you can be who you want to be. You are who you say you are in a game. You create an avatar. And that's a bit like coming to America and changing your name and changing your identity. And here I am, I'm in America now, fresh start.
Well, let me just touch on one thing that I saw in your bio that I wanted to touch on, and then we'll get to your book. I see the Secret Policeman's Ball on here. What did you do with that?
Yeah, that's the sort of thing the only thing I've been known for 40 years, really, which is quite funny, because it was just a little sketch that I wrote one morning with a hangover in 1978. It was a very small show in Hampstead Theatre. I think it was called Having a Ball. It had Peter Wilson, Elspeth Walker, and completely unknown Rowen Atkinson in it. Now, I'd worked with Peter before. I used to write his material. He was very funny. But after the show, he said, God, you were lucky you weren't in this. I'm not an actor, so it was never a possibility. But he said, I had to follow Rowen every sketch. It's impossible. Because Rowen, we all knew how good he was. We'd seen him. Hampstead Theatre wanted to do a show built around him. And I thought, well, God, I better write something for the new guy. Because I think the only other writer was, apart from Rowen and Peter and Elspeth was Richard Curtis. I don't remember any other writers being there. And we were all completely unknown. And so one morning I just woke up and started writing a list of names. And we got sillier and sillier. And then realised that there was a sketch coming at the end of it. So it turned into be, it's a Schoolmaster. And those were his roll call. And these and then he goes on to give them his report on their essays and the hilarity that ensues. So I typed it up, and I still have the manuscript, but I don't have the typescript because I gave that to Rowan that morning, and he sort of grunted and said, "Oh, well," and walked off. And I thought, "Oh, well, that's good. He didn't say this is terrible." And the first time he did it in an empty room with just the director, Michael Radburn, and me, as far as I know, in the audience, I thought, well, this is interesting. I didn't know it was this, because he took his time. He ate every name alive and played off an invisible audience that wasn't there. And the first time he did it, it just brought the house down. And then he called me up a year later in 1979 and said, "John Cleese just rang. He wants me to be in his new charity show, and can I do the Policeman? Can I do the Schoolmaster?" So I said, "Of course you can." Yeah. So we went off to meet John Cleese and all these other people who were in what was later called the Secret Policeman's Ball. Rowan came on stage and unknown and went off a star. Nobody knew who this guy in the gown was with a clipboard, and he just ate the room alive and walked off to a roar of applause. So it was really good fun to be there for that, and to meet various Pythons, some of whom I'd met before because we shared an agent, Billy Connolly and Pete Townsend, great heroes of mine. So that was a bit of fun, and then it became Rowan's party piece. He had to do it on his all his shows. He closed for the Schoolmaster. That was his encore. And after a bit, he obviously got tired of it doing it. So he wrote a rude version of it, and someone said, "Oh, did you write this new?" I said, "What new version?" So I called his agent up and said, "Why do you?" Anyway, said, "Look, copyright belongs to the writer." So they said, "Oh gosh, sorry," and gave me half the royalties, which was extremely generous of them. So yeah, I mean, he's an extraordinary career, Rowan, and it was fun to be associated with him right at the beginning, and then later on, Not the 9 o'clock News. I was one of the writers on that.
Was that sort of a Saturday Night Live type show, or what was that? I don't know. I'm not familiar with that. Yeah.
It followed a few years after Python had finished in England. The same sort of background of people from university wits type of thing, and a brilliant Australian girl called Pamela Stevenson, who was the great thing about Pamela was she was a beautiful woman who's completely not afraid to make an idiot of herself. It's absolutely a winning combination. But the producer, John Lloyd, brilliantly decided that we weren't going to copy Python. I said, "Well, why are we going back to doing satire?" It was like, that was the week it was. It's an English TV news satire show. Why don't we go on from what Python did and follow that new path? And he said, "You've got to be joking. We're not as good as them. We've got to go. They zigged. We've got to zag." And he's exactly right. And Not the 9 o'clock News was extremely popular for several reasons. First of all, it's very good, most of it, with writers like Andy Hamilton and Richard Curtis and various others. And it was on at 9 o'clock on the new channel BBC Two in the days when there were only 4 channels. And there was not much to watch. And while the parents were watching the news, the kids were watching the piss take of the news on the other channel. And so it became hugely popular. And Rowan and Mel and Pamela and Chris Langham and Griff Rhys-Jones, when he joined it, they all became huge stars, deservedly.
Do you know Jim Piddock?
No, should I?
Well, he's sort of associated with those people. He's best of friends with Eric Idle. And he's a British actor who was in several American films, and he just wrote a book. He was on my show not too long ago.
No, I don't. I've met Eric. Eric recorded a song I wrote with the composer Lee Holdridge. I'm his lyricist, and it was MGM Studios animation division. They wanted to do a follow-up to The Secret of Nim, which had been a success. So they did The Secret of Nim 2, which wasn't. But they wanted a whole score, and they got Lee to compose it, because Lee's brilliant, and commissioned 5 songs. one of which was sung by Eric Idle. He was the bad mouse. It was my Nancy Reagan song. It's called Just Say Yes. And Eric ate it alive, came into the studio, and was just brilliant. So I don't know Jim, but I've met Eric, and we've crossed paths.
Okay. Well, I have a feeling if you ever met Jim, you probably know a lot of the same people, because it sounds like you guys were sort of intersecting circles. Yeah,
probably. Does he live in LA?
Yes, I believe he does. Yeah.
Oh, well, I'm possibly bumping into. Being a writer, I spend most of the day indoors writing.
He was
so,
in the
don't get out a lot.
The Christopher Guest films. He was in the two that I can remember. Was Best in Show
Mighty Wind?
And Mighty Wind. Yeah, he was in those two.
Mighty Wind was designed by Dorinda Wood, the costume designer, who designed the costume for the opera that Lee Holdridge and I wrote for the Los Angeles Opera. It was called Dulce Rosa. Placido Domingo conducted it, which was great to work with him. And it was based on a short story by Isabel Allende. So I know Dorinda does all of Christopher Guest's films, or did. She's now retired. And those powder blue cardigans they all had, the folk singers. So it was great.
Okay.
So I probably know the face, Jim Piddock, yes.
Yeah. Well, like I said, you probably know some of the same people. Anyways, we're kind of running down on time, so let's get to your book. Your book is called New Rock, New Roll, spelled R-O-L-E. And why did you decide to write a book? Or have you written other books?
I've written non-fiction books that have been published. I've attempted to write fiction before and not done well enough to get anything over the counter, and that's good. I'm really glad they weren't published because they're not up to the standard of these books. I find my bliss. I'm nearly 29, and became very much fixated with role-playing games online, playing multiplayer ones, and player versus player and player versus environment. And I just thought one day, what would it be like to actually be in a world like the wonderful ones that designers have created for us, these great graphic designers. These open, a sandbox world, they're called. You can just go anywhere and do anything. But of course, what you can't do is go beyond what's written as a quest. So if you bump into people and get quests, that's all written. But in the book, you're free to go anywhere. So my conceit of the book is that 3 people win a world championship of online sword and sorcery, and the next thing you know, he's standing in a field by himself in a place he's never seen before, armed only with a crappy sword and beginner level gear, and he has no idea where is he and what happened and why. And wait a minute, wolves are howling and getting closer. So he's zapped out of being a world champion to being a complete nobody in the middle of nowhere, and things get worse. And thus the adventure starts, and he has to survive, get competent, find out where he is, and try. And so the quest unfolds over the course of the book, and they don't really know what the main quest is until a couple of 100 pages in. And you get puzzles and you get clues, and then it's all explained at the end. But it's for real. The point is, it's not a game. It's just started out with gamers getting, and they're there for a reason. So it was just a delight when I discovered this. It fell out of the sky and hit me on the head, and I started writing, and haven't stopped since. I've written 4 books in the series now, and I'm on the 5th.
Is this Lord of the Rings meets Dungeons and Dragons?
Yeah, well, Ready Player One meets Lord of the Rings, and in Discworld, you can pitch it any way you like.
Okay.
I don't write like Douglas was a friend, Douglas Adams. I don't write like him or like Terry Pratchett or Tolkien. I write like I wouldn't want to. If you try to write like someone else, you usually fail. I have my own voice, and one of the things that is interesting coming from a comedy writing background is comedy fits really well with adventures, because adventures are things going wrong, disasters, collapses. It's not nice people telling jokes. And what comedy isn't full of pain, fear, misery, all that sort of stuff, as adventures are. So there's plenty of comic relief in there, which emerged as it went along. I just think I probably can't resist it when I write. I just thoroughly enjoyed it. I started writing the sequel as soon as I finished the first, while my agent was reading it. And when she got back to me, a couple of months later, it always takes agents time to get through their reading list. And she said, oh, this is exactly what people are looking for. It's escapism. It's fun. It's not gory and bloody. It's just really. I said, well, I'm already on the sequel. So she said, oh, 3-book deal. Oh, I said, it's 3 now, is it? Anyway, it's not a trilogy. It's a series. Basically, it's one adventure's wrapped up, and then another one starts in the next book. But there are sub-quests and things that happen in them, and you'll see.
How many do you anticipate are going to be in this series? You said you're up to this is the 3rd one now, right?
No, I'm on book 5. I've written
book
4,
5.
and I'm editing the 2nd book with my editor, who's brilliant. Kasich, the publishers from Ark Manor, they've given me their executive editor, Leslie Robin, and she's just brilliant. I can't speak highly enough of her insight and her input and her way she said, more of this. I want not just cutting stuff and sorting things out, but this artifact you've got here, that's a character. It's communicating with the player. Come on, let's make it a real thing. And so I go, oh yeah, that's great. Very, very good thoughts. And so those 4 books are ready to go as soon as we've done the developmental edits on them. They'll come out once a year, I think, once every year. And I'm now in the early stages of floundering around in book 5, wondering what on earth's going on, which is always fun, but it's I know it's going to end up, but I don't know how we're going to get there. As to how many, well, it depends how long I'm spared. As long as I'm above ground, I'll keep writing these, I hope.
All right. Well, Richard, we have to wind this down. Thanks so much for coming on. The new book is called New Rock, New Roll, spelled R-O-L-E. My guest is Richard Sparks. Last question. Do you have a website you want to give out?
Yes, absolutely. It's all on www.richardsparks.com. And Sparks doesn't have any units, by the way. Everything's up there. It's available for pre-order on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, amazon.co.uk if you're that side of the pond. The usual places you buy books. And it's published on December the 12th by Kasich, who are a specialist and very good science fiction fantasy house.
Okay.
So we're all ready to rock.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. This was a nice conversation. Best of luck with your book series, and I hope it keeps going for a while.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Douglas.